For 18 years, Harold Whitmore believed one simple lie had kept his granddaughter safe. Every month, without fail, he sent $10,000, money meant to protect a child he never held, to secure a future he never witnessed. He told himself distance was mercy, silence was kindness, that money could replace his absence. Then one morning, a single photograph shattered everything. Not a mansion, not a college campus, but a black teenage girl, wrapped in a donated coat, standing in line at a homeless shelter. His granddaughter. In that moment, guilt hit harder than any market crash, sharper than any loss he had ever known. His chest tightened as one terrifying question rose above all others. If the money was sent, where did it go? And worse, who decided her suffering didn't matter enough to stop it? Stay with me, because what Harold discovers next will expose a betrayal so cruel, it will force him and you to confront a truth that can no longer be ignored. Harold Whitmore had built his life on control. Control over markets, over buildings that reshaped skylines, over negotiations that made other powerful men nervous. At 74, he was known in Atlanta as a man who never missed details, never trusted instincts without proof, never let emotions cloud judgment. That discipline had made him a billionaire. And yet, on a gray Monday morning in Midtown Atlanta, one thin manila folder destroyed the single lie Harold had lived with for 18 years. Ethan Moore, the private investigator, didn't speak at first. He placed the folder on the desk slowly, as if the weight of it might crack the polished walnut surface. Harold noticed the hesitation. Ethan had handled murders, corporate fraud, missing heirs. He wasn't a man who hesitated easily. "What is it?" Harold asked, irritation creeping into his voice. Ethan exhaled. "Sir, I found your granddaughter." Harold's jaw tightened. "Good. So she's in Buckhead then, preparing for college like Denise said." Ethan didn't respond. He opened the folder. The first photo showed a young black woman standing in line outside a church-converted shelter. She wore a donated winter coat that swallowed her frame, her natural hair pulled into a tired bun. Her eyes were calm but guarded, the kind of calm that came from learning not to expect help. Harold frowned. "Why are you showing me this?" The second photo landed harder. The same girl asleep on a narrow cot in a crowded room, a backpack clutched to her chest like armor. Then the third. She stood at an industrial sink, sleeves rolled up, washing oversized pots. Soap covered her arms. Her face was focused, disciplined, quietly resilient. Harold's fingers trembled. "That's not," his voice broke. "That's not possible." Ethan nodded once. "Her name is Aaliyah Brooks. She's 18, and she's been living at Hope Haven Shelter on the South Side for 3 months. Silence filled the room, and not the comfortable silence Harold used in boardrooms to intimidate executives, but the kind that pressed against his chest and made breathing feel like work. "That's my granddaughter," Harold whispered. "She's supposed to have a trust fund. She's supposed to be safe." Ethan met his eyes. "Sir, she is safe now, but she wasn't. Not for a long time." 18 years earlier, Harold had buried his only daughter, Naomi Brooks. She was brilliant, compassionate, stubborn in the best way. A black woman who refused to let hospitals ignore poor families, who believed care was a human right. She died hours after childbirth. Her husband, Marcus, had already been gone, killed months earlier by a drunk driver after a late coaching shift at a public high school. Grief hollowed Harold out, and that's when Denise Carter arrived, Marcus's older sister, soft-spoken, respectable, church-going. She had offered to raise baby Aaliyah alongside her own children. "She'll be loved," Denise had promised. "I'll protect her like my own." Harold had done what he believed was right. He set up a monthly transfer, $10,000 every month for 18 years. Education, healthcare, opportunity, a future, over $2 million. And now his granddaughter was washing dishes in a shelter kitchen. "Where is Denise?" Harold asked quietly. Ethan swallowed. "Living in Buckhead, 5-bedroom home, 2 luxury SUVs. Her kids attend private academies. Tuition alone is over $40,000 a year." Harold closed his eyes. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft layered with cruelty. He stood so abruptly his chair scraped the floor. "Take me to her, now." The drive south took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of neighborhoods shifting from glass towers to aging brick buildings. 40 minutes of Harold realizing how little he'd ever truly seen. He had donated to shelters, written checks, posed for photos. But he had never stood on cracked sidewalks where opportunity stopped knocking. Hope Haven Shelter was quiet, clean but worn, a place that tried to preserve dignity with limited means. A woman with silver-threaded braids and steady eyes approached them. "I'm Mrs. Ruth Okafor," she said, "director here." "I'm looking for Aaliyah Brooks," Harold said. Saying her name felt foreign and sacred at the same time. Mrs. Okafor studied him carefully. She knew his face. Atlanta knew his face. "She's working," she said, "and she works hard." They found her in the kitchen. Aaliyah stood at the sink, laughter briefly lighting her face as another woman joked beside her. Then she turned back to her task, focused, self-contained, not broken, not begging. Harold's heart shattered anyway. "Miss Brooks," Mrs. Okafor said gently, "could you come here for a moment?" Aaliyah dried her hands and approached, cautious but polite. Her eyes flicked to the suits, to the expensive shoes. She'd learned what those usually meant. "Yes, ma'am?" Harold couldn't speak. "Do you know who I am?" he finally asked. She shook her head. "No, sir. Should I?" That question cut deeper than any accusation ever could. "I'm Harold Whitmore," he said. I'm your grandfather." The color drained from her face. "That's not true," she said quietly. "My aunt said my grandfather blamed me. She said he never wanted me." Harold felt something rupture inside him. "That is a lie." Aaliyah stepped back. Years of disappointment had trained her body before her mind could catch up. People don't lie about things like that for no reason. Ethan handed her copies of bank statements, page after page, transfers, dates, amounts. Her hands shook. "This says $2 million. "Yes," Harold said hoarsely, "and I sent it all for you." Aaliyah looked up, eyes burning now. "Then why did I sleep in parks? Why did I beg libraries to let me stay until closing? Why did I wash dishes for food?" No answer could fix that. Mrs. Okafor placed a steady hand on Aaliyah's shoulder. "You don't have to go with him," she said softly. Aaliyah hesitated. Then she straightened her back. "I want the truth." That night, Aaliyah sat in the back of Harold's car, silent, watching Atlanta blur past. She carried everything she owned in a single backpack. In the penthouse, she moved carefully, like someone afraid of breaking glass walls she didn't belong in. Harold watched her and understood something painful and necessary. Money had never protected her. Silence had destroyed her. And the world had looked away because a black girl surviving quietly was never considered an emergency. That night, Harold stared out at the city he'd helped build and whispered the question that would burn through every coming day. Where is every dollar I sent? And what else had been stolen from her that money could never return? Before the story continues, let me ask you something. This isn't just about one family. It's about what we choose not to see. Do you believe money can replace presence and responsibility? Yes or no? Your answers matter, because what happens next will test not just Harold, but all of us. Morning light slipped through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Harold Whitmore's penthouse, but Aaliyah Brooks was already awake. She sat on the edge of the guest bed, fully dressed, backpack at her feet. Old habits. When you grow up black and invisible, you learn to be ready to leave before anyone decides you don't belong, Harold noticed immediately. "You don't have to pack," he said gently, standing in the doorway. "This isn't temporary." Aaliyah didn't look up. That's what people say before they change their minds. The words weren't sharp. They were worse, flat, learned, earned. Harold swallowed. For the first time in decades, power meant nothing to him. He could buy buildings, silence rivals, influence policy, but he couldn't erase 18 years of neglect with a sentence. "Today," he said carefully, "we're going to ask some questions, and we're not leaving until we get answers." The first call went to Jonathan Pierce, his attorney, the second to a forensic accountant, the third to Denise Carter. She answered on the fourth ring, voice bright and polished. "Harold, what a surprise. Is everything okay?" "No," Harold said. "Nothing is okay." There was a pause, just long enough to register fear. What do you mean? I found Aaliyah. Silence, then defensiveness. She ran away. I tried to help her, Harold. She's always been difficult. Aaliyah, standing across the room, froze. Don't, Harold said coldly. Don't you dare. I gave her a roof, Denise snapped. Food, structure. You think raising a black girl in this country is easy? You think money fixes attitude? Harold closed his eyes. There it was. Not remorse. Resentment. I want every receipt, he said. Every record. Every explanation for where $2 million went. You don't trust me? Denise scoffed. I trust evidence, Harold replied and ended the call. By noon, the truth began to surface. The accountant traced transfers from Aaliyah's trust into Denise's personal accounts. Tuition payments for Denise's children, mortgage payments for the Buckhead house, luxury purchases, vacations, all while Aaliyah wore donated clothes and learned to stay silent. But the theft was only the beginning. Ethan's investigation uncovered homeschooling records designed to isolate. No social security card, no access to friends, no doctors unless absolutely necessary. Denise hadn't just stolen money, she had controlled Aaliyah's entire world. And when Aaliyah turned 18, Denise discarded her. Out, she'd said. I've done enough. Aaliyah listened as the truth unfolded, arms crossed tightly, jaw set. Pain flickered in her eyes, but she refused to cry. Crying had never changed anything before. I wasn't lazy, she said quietly. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't broken. Harold's voice shook. No, you were targeted. Because you were black. Because you were quiet. Because you trusted adults who told you obedience was survival. That afternoon, Harold insisted on confronting Denise face to face. Jonathan advised against it. Let the law work. Stay detached. But Harold needed to look her in the eye. They arrived in Buckhead just before sunset. The house was beautiful, manicured lawn, clean white stone, every brick paid for by a child who had slept on concrete. Denise opened the door and froze. Behind Harold stood Aaliyah, no longer hunched, no longer shrinking. She wore a simple coat, but she stood tall. You shouldn't be here, Denise hissed. Neither should you, Harold replied, stepping inside. Denise's composure cracked quickly. You think you're a hero now? You disappeared. You sent money and thought that made you a savior. She wasn't wrong, and Harold didn't deny it. I failed, he said, but you exploited that failure. I raised her, Denise shouted. You know how the world treats black girls. I taught her discipline. You taught me fear, Aaliyah said, voice steady. You taught me I was a burden. Denise laughed bitterly. You should be grateful. Grateful. That word hung in the air like poison. For scraps? Aaliyah asked. For lies? For being told my grandfather hated me so I wouldn't ask questions? Denise's mask slipped. Your mother had everything. Education. Attention. And then she died and suddenly you were worth millions. My children deserve that life too. So you stole it, Harold said, from a baby. Police arrived 15 minutes later. Denise didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply stared at Aaliyah as handcuffs clicked shut. You'll never belong in his world, she spat. Aaliyah met her gaze. I belong to myself. The trial moved fast. Evidence was overwhelming. Witnesses testified. Records spoke louder than lies. Aaliyah took the stand. She spoke of isolation, of learning to stay small, of realizing that when a black girl suffers quietly, the world calls it resilience instead of neglect. The jury returned in under 3 hours. Guilty. When the verdict was read, Harold felt no victory. Only resolve. 6 months later, Aaliyah walked across campus at Emory University. She studied social work. She volunteered at Hope Haven. She spoke to girls who looked like her and told them something radical. You deserve more than survival. One evening, she returned to the penthouse and found Harold waiting with tea. I'm starting a foundation, he said. In your name? Aaliyah shook her head. In my mother's? He nodded. Even better. They stood together at the window, Atlanta glowing below. Justice had come, but healing was just beginning. And for the first time, Aaliyah wasn't alone in the fight. The morning Aaliyah Brooks received her first scholarship award letter, she sat quietly at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope as if it might disappear. The penthouse was still, wrapped in the gentle hum of a city waking up below. Sunlight spilled across polished floors, touching things that once felt untouchable to her. For a long moment, she didn't open it. Harold Whitmore watched from a distance. He had learned not to rush her. Trauma had its own pace, and healing could not be forced. Not with money, not with power, not even with love. "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not anymore." Aaliyah finally broke the seal. She read the letter once, then again, then covered her mouth as tears slipped free. "I got it," she whispered. "Full tuition." Harold nodded, but his eyes were wet. This was the moment he had imagined when he first sent those checks 18 years ago. And now, finally, it was real. Not because of money, but because truth had been dragged into the light. As weeks passed, life began to settle into something that felt possible. Aaliyah attended classes during the day and volunteered at Hope Haven Shelter in the evenings. But she no longer washed dishes for survival. Now she sat with young women who looked like she once had, tired, guarded, quietly ashamed of needing help. And she spoke to them with honesty that cut through pity. "I know what it's like," she told them, "to feel invisible, to think nobody would notice if you disappeared, but you matter, and what happened to you doesn't get to define the rest of your life." Word spread. Donations followed. Not because Harold's name was attached, but because Aaliyah's story resonated. People saw themselves in her, especially those who had grown up learning to be strong too early. Together, Harold and Aaliyah established the Naomi Brooks Second Chance Fund, named after the mother Aaliyah never had the chance to know. The fund supported young people aging out of unstable homes, with special focus on communities of color, those most often told to endure instead of being protected. At the first award ceremony, Aaliyah stood at the podium, hands steady. "My mother believed care was a human right," she said, "not a privilege. This fund isn't about charity, it's about justice, about making sure silence doesn't swallow another child the way it almost swallowed me." The room rose in applause. Harold remained seated, one hand pressed to his chest, overwhelmed not by pride, but by gratitude. He had been given a chance to make things right, not perfectly, but sincerely. Later that evening, Aaliyah asked him to drive her somewhere. They returned to Hope Haven. Mrs. Ruth Okafor greeted them with open arms. "Look at you," she said, laughing softly. "Standing tall." Aaliyah smiled. "You helped me learn how." They walked through the shelter together. The same narrow halls, the same kitchen. But this time, Aaliyah didn't feel small. She felt rooted. "I used to think surviving was enough," she told Harold as they stepped outside. "But now I know survival without dignity is still a kind of loss." Harold nodded. "I wish I had understood that sooner." "You understand it now," Aaliyah replied. "That matters." On a quiet Sunday morning months later, they visited Naomi's grave. A simple headstone. Fresh flowers. Aaliyah knelt and placed her hand against the cool stone. "I wish you could see this," she whispered. "I wish you could see who I'm becoming." Harold stood beside her. "She sees you," he said, "in every life you touch." As they walked away, Aaliyah felt something shift inside her. Not closure. She had learned that word was too simple. But peace. The kind that comes when truth is acknowledged, responsibility is taken, and love shows up. Not late, but present. That night, Aaliyah sat at her desk writing an essay for class. The prompt asked her to describe a moment that changed everything. She wrote about the day a stranger walked into a shelter kitchen and told her she was not forgotten. About how she learned that being Black and abandoned did not mean being unworthy. About how pain could either harden you or teach you how to protect others. She ended with a sentence she would one day repeat often. "Justice isn't just punishment, it's restoration. It's giving back what was stolen and building something better in its place." Harold knocked gently before entering. "Tea," he said, setting it beside her. She smiled up at him. "Thank you, Grandpa." The word no longer felt heavy. It felt earned. Outside, the city of Atlanta glowed, flawed, complex, alive. Somewhere out there were still children being overlooked, still stories buried under silence. But now Aaliyah knew something she hadn't before. Silence could be broken, truth could heal, and dignity, once reclaimed, could never be taken again. Before you go, let me ask you something. This story isn't just Aaliyah's. It reflects choices we all face. How did this story make you feel? Do you think Harold truly redeemed himself by facing the truth? Did Aaliyah's journey change the way you see quiet suffering? If you like this story, comment 111 below. Tell us which country you're watching from, and please share this video with someone who needs to hear that their story and their dignity still matter.